What is up? What is going on, everybody? I am back with a video that I've been putting off for a little bit, just because I, we're going to do the Mariners end of season recap. So essentially, your last post game video of the year for the Mariners. I'm going to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Seattle Mariners. And before I do that, if you guys are new here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I am 39 subs away from 2,500. Hit the like button for me. The like button just gets the video out to more people, so I appreciate everybody that supports the channel and everybody that does all those for me. The subscriptions, the likes, all help. So thank you guys so much. One thing I've come to a conclusion on, teams like the Mariners are really kind of difficult to talk about in a way because they're not good enough to be celebrating playoff wins right now. They didn't get in, but they're not bad enough to just be making jokes about 24/7 either. If I was a fan of, Kansas City or Oakland, I could come on here just rip it to shreds. If you're a fan of the Chicago Bears, the Carolina whatever teams like that, you can kind of just make these videos and go off on them and off on them. The Mariners won 88 games. Like they were a good baseball team in 2023. I know some of you probably cringe when I said that. They were not good enough. And I've said the new slogan for me is kind of good is not good enough for this team, but they were good. And they weren't just like a middling team either. They won 88 games. You can say, oh, it was all because they beat bad teams. It doesn't matter. They got 88 wins. You get your wins where you can get them. So it makes it very tough to talk about because they're not bad. They're not bad enough to be funny, and they're not good enough to be celebrated. So they're kind of in that tough mode where, yeah, they could have easily won this division. They went into September with the lead. We can get on everything this front office and ownership did and we didn't like, and that's fair. But if this team would have just been a little bit better in September, they would have likely won this division. So it makes it very tough to break them down because I want to be critical, and they deserve the ownership, the front office deserve criticism. They deserve fans and people that follow the team to be critical of them. But I can't just rip them to shreds for putting a terrible product on the field. They haven't. They've done some good stuff. I think the core is good. How does this core go from close right there to being really good to going over the top and being a legitimate World Series contender? And that's what this offseason has got to be about for this team. So let's dive into everything from last year. I'm going to go over last offseason, the good, the bad, the ugly of 2023 for your Seattle Mariners. Let's first start with last offseason. The Mariners made additions of Kolten Wong, AJ Pollock, Teoscar Hernandez. Those are pretty much the big moves. There were some other ones that didn't end up having much of impacts. Cooper Hummel, Tommy La Stella. Those guys were camp fodder that made the roster due to some injuries. But the big names were Teoscar, Kolten Wong, and AJ Pollock. Now, I defended last offseason for the Mariners. The video's still up there. I said the Mariners had a good offseason last year. I did think they would add another bat when I made that video because there's still a little time left in the offseason. But bottom line is, I was wrong. And I've said that many times about that video. I was incorrect. It was not a good offseason. With that said, I do want to give sort of what my thoughts on it were and why I think the front office did what they did. This is not a defense of it, but I'm giving the reasons I think they thought it would be enough to put them over the top. And these were my thoughts as well. You were getting a significant upgrade at second base. Kolten Wong, career-wise, has been better than Adam Frazier. I don't think anybody predicted Kolten Wong to end up being maybe the worst everyday player in the American League. You can't predict that. Those things are just unfortunately things that happen. I'll get into some ways they can avoid that. Not much you can do about that, though, just super unfortunate. AJ Pollock has mashed lefties his entire career and couldn't hit lefties, the broadside of a left-handed barn, for whatever term you want to use. And Teoscar Hernandez probably was an upgrade over Mitch Haniger. Mitch just couldn't stay healthy. While Teo was extremely streaky, you probably did get that upgrade there, but just not enough to boost you over the top. So there was some bad luck there. Kolten Wong and AJ Pollock should not have been as bad as they were. I'm going to address it, so just stay patient. I also think they looked at the offseason and said, we'll have a full season of Luis Castillo versus the 12 or 13 starts he made last year. A full season of George Kirby, who came up in May. A full season of Cal Raleigh. Remember in 2022, the big dumper, didn't really take off until June, I want to say, early June. Julio had that rough April last year. The Kellenic Pollock platoon should be better than what Jesse Winker gave you. And then you should get solid production from Gino, Ty France, and some other guys around the diamond. It was not a good enough offseason plan, clearly. It clearly wasn't, because the team went from a playoff team last year to a non-playoff team this year. That's not good enough. So that's a failure. Now, do I think there was some stuff out of their control with that? Yes, I do. I don't think Colton Wong you know what I mean? I don't think you can predict Colton Wong to be the worst hitter in baseball. But here's the problem. When you go for these middling free agents, Colton Wong, AJ Pollock, guys like that who are solid MLB players, but they're not elite superstars. That they're middle of the road guys. You run that risk. You run the risk of them just kind of falling off because they're just not good enough to sustain, everyday success over the course of a long haul. Or I should say they're susceptible to seasons like that. When you go after those guys in this tier, the bottom tiers of free agency, Colton Wong was a trade, but you know what I mean? You run that risk. You run the risk of getting guys that are okay players, solid players, but not superstars. That stuff can happen. Now, it stinks that it happened to two players that have been pretty good players in their careers, and there definitely is some bad luck to that. But I think the goal and what fans want is you go out and get more established free agents, guys that are more closer to that superstar level of play, the less likely you're going to have a drop off like that. I'll use the Texas Rangers as an example. Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, legitimate superstars. They haven't had much of a drop off because they are tier 1 players, not, if you're looking like a 5-tier scale, not tier 3, tier 4 guys. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't add those type of players in this offseason. They're going to have to make little additions because you have to fill out your roster. And had the Mariners gone out and, let's say, 2 years ago signed Corey Seager, and then Seager wasn't coming here, but you know what I mean, and then gotten Colton Wong, that's fine. You've got to offset. You can't have superstars at every position. You're going to have to make smaller free agency, lower level tier moves to help put you over the top for sure. So I'm not against them adding that, but you've got to go get more of those tier 1 players so that those lower tier players don't completely derail your season. I mean, if Colton Wong is just his career averages, this team probably makes the playoffs. If AJ Pollock is his career average against lefties, they probably make the playoffs. But you're relying on guys that just are in that bottom middle tier level of acquisitions, and they're susceptible to stuff like that, unfortunately. So they've got to do a better job. They've got to get another bat in that middle of the order, another elite starting pitcher. I don't care where it is. A run saved is as good as a run earned, or a run scored, I should say. So I don't care where you do it, but they need to make some impact moves this free agency. It's not a great free agent market. I'm going to have videos later this week that's going to dive into free agency and which players I think they should target. And trades as well are going to be available. We know Jerry likes to get in the trade market, so don't be shocked if they look at that avenue as well. But they've got to get someone better for the middle of the order or the rotation to go with Logan, George, and Castillo. Jerry did mention that, another bat in the middle of the order, which is awesome. That's good to hear. It doesn't have to be Ohtani. It doesn't have to be, but you need someone that's a legitimate, I hate saying superstar because there's so few of those, but at least a very, very good player, not a bottom tier free agency or trade guy that could help if everything goes right. And unfortunately did. So I was wrong about the offseason. They were wrong about it. Was there some bad luck there? Yeah, there was. I think you could sign or trade for Colton Wong again and he'd have a better season. But it is what it is. And ultimately in life and everything in sports, at your job, at my job, you're judged based on results. And the results were not good enough. They were not with those acquisitions. There may have been some sound reasoning. I don't think anybody thinks they were stupid acquisitions. I think they made sense for what this team was trying to do. But the results were not good enough, and we're judged on results. And Jerry, Justin, and Scott should be judged the same way as any of us would at our jobs. And the results for their offseason were not good. And they've acknowledged that. To Jerry and Justin's credit, they've both said that they failed in the offseason. So that's good. That's good that they see that those type of moves were not good enough. I guess I see it too now. I've had my eyes open to it. Like I always say, the good news is I'm not paid to make decisions for the Seattle Mariners. So we'll let Justin and Jerry figure that one out, and I can just continue to make videos of it. So the offseason, kind of an F. I think it was a failure at the end of the day. That they've got to get more impact bats, and you'd love to do it without having to trade away guys as well. You get Teoscar, and that's an upgrade over Mitch Haniger, but you lose Eric Swanson. So you got to try and hopefully maybe hit that free agent market and see what you can do. So let's focus on the good, because there was a lot of good in the 2023 Mariners. There was a lot of positives, and actually, as I went through this, there was actually more than I thought there were. So let's dive into it. The first one's going to be J.P. Crawford. J.P. put up 4.9 FWAR. Fangraphs WAR wins above replacement level. I rounded it up to 5 just for the sake of the video. JP had a tremendous season. Driveline obviously did its work for JP. It sounds like Ty France is going to go there with him this offseason. I know a lot of us want Ty France off the roster, but he's right now he's a Seattle Mariner. So whatever he can do to improve is a good thing, and we'll let the offseason play out however it plays out. But JP obviously took huge steps forward offensively. The power, I think he hit 19 or 20 home runs this year. The on-base skills were elite. The line drive rates were elite. Now, the funny thing is, when JP first came up, Gold Glove shortstop, defensive guy, and not much of a bat, kind of a guy you want hitting number 9. If you go to like Baseball Savant and those pages, JP's defense actually comes out really poor. I don't think it's quite that bad. I know for a while there he was in like the worst percentile for range and stuff like that. I don't think JP is a very good defensive shortstop, but I think he does a good job limiting errors. He's pretty fundamentally sound. And if this bat stays the way it is, that's fine. I can live, if I've got a no bat shortstop, he better be Brendan Ryan defensively, a guy that can get to everything. That's fine. If you're going to be kind of a lower tier defensive shortstop, you better hit. And JP did that. So however you want to do it, I will take 5 WAR from my shortstop every single season. So JP's development and taking that step forward and the work he put in and just that leadership that we saw from him as well. Truly, truly tremendous. And it's a shame going back to sort of the offseason, you had Colton Wong, Pollock, Ty France take a step back because, man, JP's development was really a massive step forward for this organization. Julio Rodriguez. Listen, I know there were some frustrations with Julio this year. The guy put up 5.9 FWAR, which I think ranked 4th in the American League, 5th maybe. I think Ohtani, Seager, and Luis Robert were the only ones in front of him. That's a tremendous season. Like, you cannot say that's a negative. Now, Julio needs to be more consistent. His August was amazing. Like, I want more of that. But it can't just be amazing August and then sort of like okay bat with great defense around it. It just needs to be more consistent. Instead of that 5.9 FWAR, like 4 of it coming in August, you'd like to see it spread out a little bit more. The overall season is a success for Julio. And you can't really control where you get your numbers from. Like, I've always said that with baseball, that it doesn't really matter where they come from as long as at the end of the year they're good. Sort of like the wins with the Mariners. Well, they only succeeded in August, so who cares? You got to get your wins somewhere. At the end of the day, they won 88. At the end of the day, Julio finishes with almost 6 FWAR. That's good. But you would, just like Julio was kind of a microcosm of the team this year. You'd love to see a little bit more consistency from April to September. Not just a couple hot months and then some down ones. So I think Julio, like I said, microcosm of the team as a whole, okay. But you'd love to see just a little bit better numbers spread out throughout the year. That would be my critique. Some of the swings Julio had, there were some ugly swings that were Javier Baez level swings that were frustrating, especially in September. I think Julio was pressing. I think that's something they've got to get with the coaching staff's got to work with him on. I think some of the leaders have got a beard hair just hanging down there. That's annoying me. Did I get it? I think I got it. It was just dangling there. Where I lost my, the coaches and maybe some of the leaders in this clubhouse could work with him on is just getting more consistent, trying not to hit that 8-run home run in the 5th inning. I'm not worried about Julio clutch. I know some people have gotten on that he's not clutch. I think most hitters in baseball, if you look at their clutch, it's their career averages. Most hitters hit the same with runners in scoring position than they do without runners in scoring position. So I expect when it's all said and done, the dust clears. If Julio's career batting average is 280, then I expect his average with runners in scoring position to be about 280. So I'm not too worried about that. I think, maybe Julio was pressing a little bit in some of those spots, but I think that's stuff that's all pretty fixable. The big three in the pitching staff were a positive: Logan, Kirby, and Castillo. Logan finishes with a 3.73 ERA, 3.2 F4. Kirby goes 4.4 F4 with a 3.3 ERA. Castillo 3.4 F4 with a 3.34 ERA. That is essentially, let's see, 3, 7, about 11 F4 from those three starting pitchers. They had tremendous seasons. Now, it was super frustrating that Castillo's last two starts were probably his worst two starts of the year, and that was very frustrating with the season on the line to have those type of starts. But as a whole, and that's what this is about, this is not a September recap, this is a season recap. Luis Castillo had a very solid season. Um, George Kirby, extremely solid. There were some hiccups, a little bit there August, September, where he struggled a bit, but he finished the year really strong, which was good to see. I know there was the comment, I made a video on that. Kirby apologized. Scott got over it. I'm over it. Kirby's a young guy, going to say things. I still have the utmost faith with George Kirby on the mound. And Logan Gilbert was solid too. Definitely probably the number 3 of that group. But they all had moments where they looked like the best starter. They all had moments where they, had some downs. It's going to happen as a starting pitcher. But all in all, as a whole, those three had a tremendous, tremendous season. Disappointing September. Definitely, like I said, that the last two Castillo starts leave a bad taste in your mouth a little bit. But overall, still a tremendous, tremendous season from those guys. And I thought Bryan Woo and Bryce Miller should be thrown into the positives as well. I'm not ready to just hand over starting rotation slots to them. And I don't think the Mariners should trade starting pitching depth necessarily, because I think they're going to need it in 2024. So, but all in all, these are two guys, Miller and Woo, that did not expect to be pitching as much as they did this season in the big leagues, maybe a cup of coffee in September. And I thought they did an admirable job, to consider that this team lost Robbie Ray, Marco Gonzalez, Easton McGee, Emerson Hancock. These guys came up and really, I thought, gave it their all, and they deserve credit for that. I thought that in the grand scheme of things, they were a net positive for the Mariners this season. This is going to be sort of a anecdotal one under the good. Actually, let me also get to the bullpen real quick. Oh, I've got a couple more on the good. Then I'll get to the anecdotal stuff. Cal Raleigh, 4.7 F4. A lot of that came from a great defensive year for Cal. I mean, he was a man on a mission throwing out runners, especially towards the end of the year. You were not stealing a base off of Cal Raleigh. Another solid offensive season as well. I believe he finished with more F4 than Adley Rutschman this year. So truly one of the premier players in baseball at his position is Cal Raleigh at catcher. Obviously, is a Scott Boras client, a little nervous that he won't be a Mariner for his career. He is going to get paid when he is ready to hit free agency. But in the meantime, he is a Seattle Mariner, a tremendous player. Just amazing how, I remember in April and May last year, Cal Raleigh at-bats were just brutal to watch. They were just, it just looked like a guy that had no, I wanted Luis Torrens playing. Like, it was that bad where you're like, oh my gosh, please give me Luis Torrens. And then Cal went down, and then Tom Murphy got hurt, and something just clicked. Something just clicked for the big dumper. And ever since then, he has been a man on a mission, putting up almost 9 F4 over his full seasons as a Seattle Mariner. Truly one of the really cool stories in baseball, and just one of the cool guys is our dumper. So great season for Cal Raleigh as usual. And that's what's so frustrating. You actually got really good production up the middle. Cal, JP, and Julio combined for 16 F4 this season. That's tremendous. So again, it will go back to the offseason, whereas if team could have just put a little bit more around those guys, we may be celebrating a division title. It's unfortunate that they didn't. And like I said, there was some consistency stuff where I wish Julio would have been a little bit more consistent throughout the year. But at the end of the day, the numbers are still really good for all three of those guys. The bullpen, the Mariners did a good job. Kudos to the front office again for finding guys like Gabe Speier, Justin Topa, Taylor Saucedo that offset some frustrating performances. Diego Castillo dropped off. Matt Festa dropped off. Penn Murphy was hurt and missed a lot of the season. So, nice job by finding some of these guys. Even Trent Thornton, I thought overall was solid. Isaiah Campbell looks good. Bullpens are always tough because they just change year to year. Mariners had one of the best bullpens in baseball last year. And when the season ended this year, you didn't have Paul Sewald in there, Diego Castillo in there, all those guys. So bullpens change so much from year to year. It's hard to make a preview and go, oh, next year with Brash, Munoz, Topa, Spire, all these guys are going to be great. This organization's done a great job of finding the Paul Sewalds, the Spires, the Topas, but you just never know with bullpens. And there'll be guys next year that step up and have big seasons that we don't even know about. And someone in this group will drop off. The big names in the bullpen, Matt Brash had a real solid year, 2.1 FWAR, which for a reliever is outstanding. 100 strikeouts, 2.27 FIP. Sometimes the command control is not perfect for Matt Brash. It's just something you're going to have to live with Brash is he's going to get the strikeouts. He's going to get very, very weak contact induced. He got BABIP'd a bit in the beginning of the year with just everything that was put in play, dropped in for a hit against him. That normalized as expected throughout the year. Like I said, the command's always just going to be something that's not going to be perfect for Brash. Listen, if Matt Brash's command was perfect, you would have Matt Brash would be the most epic mega reliever of all time that would never give up a hit. You'd have an unfair advantage putting Matt Brash on the hill. Every pitcher's got something they're just not perfect at. For Brash, that's it. You got to live with it. Everything else is fantastic. Munoz a little up and down this year. At the end of the day, the numbers were still fantastic for Andres Munoz. I would say definitely not as dominant as 2022. I think we can all agree with that. There was a time last year Munoz came in, it was lights out, game over. You were always a little bit on edge, I think, with Munoz coming in this year. Still a solid season. Missed some time with injuries, and I do wonder if that affected him a little bit. The slider didn't quite have that same effect that it did in 2022, but he started throwing that more power sinker, which was a really, really effective pitch down the stretch for him. So Munoz and Brash, you feel pretty good as your top line relievers. Like I said, some really nice performances from some other guys. Not really worried about the bullpen. I know people like, oh, they need to grab another arm. And I do. I think you can add another arm to that bullpen. But this team's done a really good job with finding those guys. So it's not something that I'm just super concerned about going into 2024. The last, and this is going to be thrown under positives, which might sound a little weird, but this team was, and I know people are going to hate to say, you can turn it off if you want when I say this, the team was unlucky a little bit in 2023. I'm not blaming that. I'm not saying, oh, Jerry, Justin have nothing to account for. It was just bad luck, whatever, move on, people. It's not what I am saying. But they did go 25 and 26 in one-run games, which actually normalized a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was worse than that. They must have won a decent amount of one-run games in September, oddly enough. So they actually did finish about 500. You'd expect a team like the Mariners to probably be more, I don't know, I would say 28 and 23 in one-run games, a little bit over 500. And that would have been enough to get them in. But yeah, it is what it is. The reason that people go, why do you bring up one-run games as some sort of bad luck thing? One-run games come down to a lot of random factors. It's a lot of, a little blooper gets through, a wild pitch. There's so many things that just baseball things, random occurrences that can happen in close games. And people are going to look at, well, the bullpen, that's people are going to blame that in the bullpen. But the Oakland A's had a better record in one-run games for a while. I don't know if at the end of the year they did, but there was a time in the middle of the year when the A's had a better record in one-run games. Their bullpen's terrible. The Angels beat the Mariners in a one-run game where the Mariners had bases loaded, nobody out. The Angels bullpen's terrible. You know what I mean? Like, now that's not, the Mariners could have done things to win some of these games. Like, I'm not saying like it's bad luck that they left the bases loaded, nobody out in extra inning games. That's awful. You've got to capitalize there. They need to play better too. I'm just saying that is something that could stabilize a little bit and go in their favor, for next season. 6-14 in extra inning games is another one. I would expect this team to be much closer to 500, in extra inning games. 6-14 is probably outside of the Padres, who I think won one extra inning game this year. That's got to be one of the worst in baseball for extra inning results. In fact, let's pull it up right now. Let me pull it up. Can I find my mouse? I can. Let me see. MLB records in one-run games, 2023. Let's see if I have it here. Here we go. So extra innings, I'm looking at it right now, AL East, everybody was better. The White Sox were actually, even the White Sox were 5-11. Kansas City was 3-4 in extras. Houston was 1-8 in extra inning games. Wow, and Texas was 2-8. So there, I mean, and that would be a good point to people to say, no, it wasn't bad luck. Houston and Texas were actually both worse. Ironically enough, the A's were 6-8. I mean, the Mariners definitely San Diego 2-12. It was a bottom 5 record in extra inning games. Now, unfortunately, the teams above you also seem to have some bad luck in those. So I don't know, as much as I think it's going to come back for the Mariners, Houston and Texas will probably get better in those results as well. So that was kind of glad I looked at that. But it is something that I think should stabilize for this team, and they can get a little bit better in those tough situations. And we've seen them win those type of games before, so I don't think it's anything that they're inherently bad at them. So let's finish with the bad for 2023, and then I will go ahead and get out of here and give my final thoughts on this team. I talked about the offseason. I mean, no other way to put it. And I can defend it, and I have. I've given the reasons why I think they did what they did, but it doesn't make it good. You know what I mean? You can defend something and say, hey, I think there's sound logic to it, but that doesn't necessarily make it the right way to go about it. And listen, if this team wants to compete with the heavy hitters, they're going to have to spend a little bit more money. I want to be clear on that. I'm also not sitting here saying, go get him, go get him, go get him. Like, if we just spent willy-nilly, you could end up with Chris Bryant and Trevor Story, who were two guys the Mariners were interested in. And that would be a disaster if you had both those guys on this roster. It would be a mess. You'd be stuck with those contracts and their poor performance in the beginning of their deals. I'm not saying you don't need to do your due diligence on guys, and you don't just want to spend, but they do have to look at how they can add some impact bats through free agency, trades as well, and we'll see what ends up happening. Ty France falls into the bad. I'm actually blown away. He had 0.5 F4. I'm surprised it wasn't negative. 104 WRC plus. Again, I'm actually surprised it was that good. And listen, I'll be critical of the ownership, the front office, the coaching staff. The players deserve some blame too. Ty France plays a little bit better, plays closer to last year. You probably get in the playoffs. It was an awful season for Ty France. And we're going on now a full calendar year of baseball since the All-Star break of 2022. The Ty France has just not been a good player. Good to see he's going to Driveline with JP. Hopefully that can help. And again, like I said earlier in the video, I get some people don't want Ty France on the roster, and that may end up being the case. But right now, he's on the roster. So any way he can look to get better is a good thing, but definitely a major disappointment of a season for Ty France. Eugenio Suarez was kind of a weird one. He actually finishes with 3.2 F4, the same as Logan Gilbert. Most of that came from defense. And it's honestly why I'm okay with Gino being on the roster. If Gino's the third baseman in 2024 and they make other additions around the diamond, then I'm okay with it. I think Gino, you get enough pop from the bat and you have Gold Glove caliber defensive third baseman. If your roster around it is good enough, I think that's fine. But you can't go into 2024 with Gino being your big middle of the order bat. I think you've got to look to upgrade there. And if Gino's hitting 6th or 7th, I'm fine with that. I'd much prefer, if you're going to keep one of Gino and Ty, I'd prefer Gino. But we'll see what ends up happening in the offseason. I also have a note here on my paper of Jarred Kelenic, and I don't know where to put Jarred Kelenic. His overall numbers, in fact, let me pull up Kelenic's numbers here real quick and actually pull them up. I just went into Jarred Kelenic. Just pulling it up on Fangraphs here. I mean, Kelenic finishes with 1.3 F4, and you figure had he played those couple months, he probably gets you 2. Offensively, he finishes with a 108 WRC plus, 327 OBP, 419 slugging. Again, I don't know what to make of Jarred Kelenic. That's his best season. That's his best season. He's still young. How old is Kelenic here? Does it have, give me a date of birth here? I think he's 23, 20, he's 24. He's 24. I'm not done with Jarred Kelenic. I don't think I would ever give up on a 24-year-old that just had his best season. But a lot of that is carried by April. He had a ridiculous April where he was a legitimate MVP candidate. The rest of the year, Not great. Now, listen, you don't get to take away a player's best month. If we took away Julio's August, his year wouldn't look nearly as good. If you went to every player in baseball and took away their best month, they would look worse. So Kelenic doesn't deserve to have that April taken away. But when you're not an established superstar yet, I am a little worried that if you just look at May through the end of the year, Jared Kelenic was pretty meh as a player. I'm not against Jared Kelenic being on this team, not against him being your opening day left fielder next year, but you've got to make other additions around the diamond. I said in my live stream the other day, outside of JP, Cal, and Julio, I don't think anybody should be guaranteed a spot next year. Now, you're not going to go into 2024 with Cal, JP, Julio, and all new players. There's going to be guys from this year that are going to make the team and are going to play. You're not going to upgrade 7 positions around the diamond in an offseason. It's just not going to happen. But I don't think anybody should feel necessarily safe that they're locked in outside of those 3. I think everybody else, if you can find an acquisition that's an improvement over those guys, I think you need to do it. If you can get, I don't think they're going to, because I don't think the Guardians are going to trade Jose Ramirez, but let's say it was a possibility, then Gino can go somewhere else. Jose Ramirez is better, roll with Jose Ramirez. If you've got a chance to get, Juan Soto or something, I don't know who, again, I'm going to look at all of it here in the next week or two, then Jared Kelenic, whatever, like he can be a platoon guy or trade him. I'm not against making the upgrades to this team. 2019, 2020, 2021 was the years to let the kids play, see what they can do, see what they can give you, and see what you've got. Now it's about putting a team together that can win a World Series. And how do you do that? Again, I'm not saying you go sign 7 free agents and you kick all these guys to the curb. Gino, Ty, Kelenic, Teo with the qualifying offer. We'll see what happens. Some of these guys are going to be back, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But none of them should feel like their job is safe. And if you can find an upgrade and it puts you over the top, then so be it. If you can get a stud left fielder that's just immensely better than Jared Kelenic, then fine. If Kelenic goes somewhere else and takes off, but the Mariners got their World Series with their left fielder, I'm okay with that. You sometimes have to make those sacrifices in order to be a World Series winner. And you can't be timid about it. I'm not saying trade guys to trade them. I've said that probably 20 times. But if you can make those upgrades, I think you need to do it. So I'm going to look at, everything with free agency and possible trade candidates in the offseason. We'll get into all that here in the next week. Listen, overall, the season was not a success for the Mariners. That doesn't mean there weren't internal successes. I'm excited for Ryan Bliss at second base. I think that's fun. JP's step forward this year was amazing. Julio ends up having technically by, F4 a better season than his rookie season. Cal Raleigh didn't drop off in 2023. You did see some improvements from Jared Kelenic. The starting pitching, the big 3 were good. You had some injuries. That you should, be able to hopefully overcome next year. Robbie Ray got hurt. Easton McGee, and I know Easton McGee wasn't a stud that we were looking at to carry this rotation, but might have been nice into September to have that depth along with Marco Gonzalez. Emerson Hancock injury hurt. And an injury that I'm going to say that I think is really underrated how much it hurt the Mariners was Tom Murphy. I think a healthy Tom Murphy, especially when you saw those lineups against left-handed pitching at the end of the year that they were running out, having Murphy in the middle of that would have helped tremendously. To have Tom Murphy available in September. So, yeah, I can't call this season a success. I will not do it. It wasn't. The goal was to take a step forward each year, and they didn't. They technically, I don't want to say they didn't take a huge step backwards, but they kind of stayed here and some other teams passed them, right? Like Texas ended up passing them. So they stayed sort of stagnant while other teams, went ahead of them. I'm not down on this team for 2024. I think we saw there was a lot more positives and negatives with some of these players. I think you have a good core in place. If you can make the moves around them, easier said than done. I think this team can get to 93, 94 wins pretty, I don't want to say the word easily, but I think you can get there with this team. I don't think that this franchise is cooked or anything like that, but you've got to make the right moves this offseason if you're Jerry Justin, to offset, maybe some of the big swing and miss you've got with this team. That's the last thing I'll talk about here. I'm not super worried. Oh, this team struck out a bunch. I know a lot of people are up in arms about that. I wasn't as much. Outs are outs. But there is something to be said for having guys in those situations where you've got runners on that aren't putting the ball in play, that are striking out, that are streaky. My thing was more the streakiness than the strikeouts. Gino, Teo, Julio to an extent, Cal. When you have guys that have swing and miss in their game, they've got tremendous pop, but they're going to be streaky hitters. So I look in the offseason and maybe want to get some guys in this lineup that are more contact oriented. I'm not against home runs at all. You can hit 30 home runs. God bless you. But guys in this lineup that can be more put the ball in play, more consistent, more consistency from the lineup, I think would be key. So we'll dive into all of it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you took something out of this video. Hit the like button. Comment what your thoughts on this season were, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And I will see you guys all later this week for another Mariners video, and we'll get back into Seahawks content as well now that the bye week is done. Take care, everybody, and go Mariners. Peace.